Hey, I'm about to start a new series on heavy metal and hard rock books. Gonna look at 10 books an episode, and we can start right away. And I'm gonna make this brief because I've touched upon this book several times in my videos, but it was very important to me. The Collector's Guide to Heavy Metal by Martin Popoff, who's a Canadian author that has gone on to write probably dozens of hard rock and metal books since this. This came out in, I think, 1997. And again, there's been thousands and thousands of releases since 1997, and this definitely wasn't every metal release ever up until this point. But it does have all the basics for sure. And just as in my early teens, I got this book, and that's just where I familiarized myself with all the big bands: Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Ozzy, Van Halen. A little bit of extreme metal in here, not too much, but very instrumental to me in my metal opinions, I'd say. Also appropriate to look at early, this is Iron Man, the autobiography of Tony Iommi. My Journey Through Heaven and Hell and Black Sabbath. So it was written by Tony himself. Just his whole life through Black Sabbath and his personal life. You gotta read that if you're a metal fan. I don't have the Ozzy book, but I did get it from a library, and I guess it was entertaining enough. I just never really took it too seriously. Like, it's probably just some random memories of Ozzy's and someone else filling in the blanks. This is a really good one. This is The Devil's Cradle. The story of Finnish black metal. So it's a lengthy book, and somewhat in a chronological order, starting off with chapters on Beherit, Impale Nazarene, moves on, and along the way they're talking about lesser known names as well, moving on to the Hornas and Behextons of the world, up into the cosmic churches of the world that are popular right now. So this was put out by the record label Svart. I think I got this through Hell's Headbangers. Don't know if it's still there or not, but this is definitely a book I am going to read again from cover to cover. It's awesome. For the Sake of Heaviness, The History of Metal Blade Records by Brian Slagle, who is the owner and CEO of Metal Blade Records. And he's definitely a very well-loved figure in the metal world. People seem to like him no matter where he goes. Metal Blade is not only one of the most important labels in the early stages of metal, but definitely one of the best labels and most popular to this day. There he is with King Diamond. It was important in the early years of Metallica. Speaking of which, and again, this is definitely about Brian and his history of running the label, with a lot of cool stories along the way. And several years later, he would put out this one, Swing of the Blade. More stories from Metal Blade Records. This is a newer book, and I bought it pretty recently, and I put a dent in it, but I haven't finished it yet. But I think I'm going to really like it. But it's a little bit different than the first book. This is kind of about Metal Blade in general. And this takes a number of bands and spends a chapter each really delving into his relationship with them, both professional and personal. Like the first chapter was all about Armored Saint, a band that I've never really listened to much, so I find that interesting. There's a chapter with Fate's Warning, Metallica, bands he goes way back with. And again, I haven't gotten that far in this book, but I hope there's also some newer bands represented in here. Gonna move on to more of a hard rock thing. This is Season of the Witch, How the Occult Saved Rock and Roll. There's been quite a few books like this over the years, just basically looking at, again, the occult and its involvement in rock and roll, starting with, the whole Robert Johnson story through the 60s and 70s, leading into the heavy metal that we all know and love. So this didn't tell me a whole lot I didn't already know, but I thought it was an interesting read. Take It Off. This is Kiss, Truly Unmasked. This is a very cool book because it is based entirely on the non-makeup years of Kiss, which are not only some of my favorite Kiss albums, but also the most metal for sure. And the lesser talked about era of the band. So this does seem like an oral history, but I totally recommend that one. That came out a couple years ago. Not really metal, but underground music. This is No by Boyd Rice, who is more so known for neo-folk and experimental sound music. He's done a whole bunch of stuff. But this is kind of just his opinions on different subjects: peace, poverty, hopes and dreams, idealism, activism, cults of personality. Kind of a short book, but he's an interesting guy. And again, cool book.